In the 2000 film The House of Mirth, adapted from the novel by Edith Wharton, a young society woman navigates the treacherous waters of New York's elite social circles, where a single misstep can mean the difference between a life of luxury and utter ruin. Set against the backdrop of the Gilded Age excesses of turn-of-the-century Manhattan, Lily Bart, a beautiful, intelligent woman approaching 30, is dangerously late for marriage in her world. Though born to privilege, she lacks the fortune needed to maintain her position independently. Her survival depends entirely on securing a wealthy husband, yet she repeatedly sabotages her own chances through a combination of pride, romantic idealism, and fatal miscalculations. Lily's world begins to fall apart when she compromises herself with promises of a quick fortune. Realizing her mistake too late, she is then betrayed by her friend Bertha, who orchestrates Lily's social downfall to cover her own indiscretions. Lily soon finds herself cast out from the only world she knows. The film starkly portrays how quickly a woman without protection can fall. Lily discovers to her surprise, after her aunt's death, that she is left with only a paltry inheritance, barely enough to cover her debts. Having missed her opportunity for marriage into society, she descends into the bowels of the working class. Her dignity eroded, her beauty fading, she spirals into addiction and depression. Lily's downfall exposes the fragility of a woman's position in a world where wealth is inherited or married into, and reputation is the only currency that matters. The tragedy culminates in Lily's death from an overdose of laudanum. Her final moments serve as a testament to how the rigid social structures of the Gilded Age could either elevate or destroy a woman of that time, where even the most privileged could find themselves just one mistake away from the point of no return. Last week, Kate released a new video where she announced her intention to create a video series on nature and the four seasons. And once again, it did not get the reception she was hoping for. One outlet described it as annoying. Commenters wondered aloud, what exactly is the purpose of these videos? Kate comes off as a woman desperately searching for a sense of purpose. And she seems to think that these art projects can substitute for royal duties. What on earth is going on with Kate Middleton? Because ever since she returned from her mysterious hiatus, something just doesn't sit right. The woman we're seeing today is not the same Kate we saw before that sudden or planned abdominal surgery. Before, Kate may have been silent, but she projected a kind of glossy confidence. Now she looks vacant, muted, almost sedated, like she's been lobotomized. Viewers have commented on her glassy stare and near robotic demeanor in her official public engagements she's attended. And what exactly is she saying in these videos? Well, not much really. Platitudes about nature, B-roll of her standing in a field, trotting out a new passion project that no one really understands. She's abandoned her early years project, the one thing we were told was her life's work. It's as if every part of her public persona is being replaced with cinematic filler, and it's becoming increasingly harder to tell what's actually real and what's some digitized version of her life. And it's getting eerie, because if we're being honest, each of these highly produced video productions have a strange familiarity about them. It's almost like she's trying to find her true self, but through other people. And folks, many of you may not remember, but there was a time pre-Meghan when Kate did not enjoy the kind of positive media coverage she does today. She's often been accused of copying other people. This goes way back, long before the target was on the Sussex backs. Earlier this week, Kate appeared in an outfit designed by Victoria Beckham, whom we are told is not on speaking terms with the Sussexes. Okay, but there was a time when Kate was accused of copying Victoria Beckham, not just for her fashion, but down to her mannerisms and demeanor. And it's not just Kate. Lately, both her and William seem to be taking a page from the Sussex lookbook. And folks, I don't know whose idea this all is, but it just comes off looking forced and at times comically awkward, and the public's not buying it. It's becoming increasingly obvious that Kate is being left out of certain royal events. She was a no-show at Camilla's garden party, and she was notably excluded from a reception hosted at Buckingham Palace for community groups raising awareness for cancer. Present were Charles, Camilla, the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, but no Kate. And folks, something doesn't add up. Kate Middleton was arguably the most high-profile cancer patient for all of last year. And now it's like they want us to forget that she ever supposedly had cancer. And come to think of it, all of last year, after her big announcement, not a single member of the royal family had anything to say about Kate's alleged cancer diagnosis. William only mentioned it obliquely when he found its usefulness in allowing him to get out of things he didn't want to do. In fact, when you think about it, the only people who talked about it ad nauseum was the British press. The whole affair reeks of a massive media campaign designed to soften her image by extracting maximum sympathy from the unsuspecting public. Or it could be a cover-up, but for what? And speaking of cover-ups, lately there's been a very strategic rehabilitation campaign unfolding right before our eyes. After Harry's BBC interview, the press began comparing it to Andrew's catastrophic Newsnight disaster, as if a son confronting his father's cruelty could ever be on the same level as a man credibly accused of abusing a trafficked teenager. Then came a woman from Andrew's past appearing in the press to vouch for his innocence, not while Virginia was alive, mind you, but now after her death, when she can no longer defend herself. The palace doesn't even try to hide it anymore. They're gaslighting us in real time, hoping we forget the photos, the yacht parties, the flight logs, and the infamous interview. Why the sudden need to polish Andrew's image? Well, there are two reasons. The first, the palace can't stand that Andrew exposes their hypocrisy in their appalling treatment of the Sussexes. And two, because Andrew knows too much. He's not just the embarrassing uncle, he's got some leverage. Sources have whispered for years that Andrew holds serious dirt, not just on Charles, but on William and Kate, including possibly what happened in December of 2023. So the palace does what it always does when it's confronted. It protects its own, even if its own is a man who's been credibly accused of the vilest of crimes. So while the press continues its campaign to destroy Harry and Meghan's reputation, they quietly lift Andrew out of the muck, hoping no one notices, because it isn't just about protecting Andrew, it's about protecting everything he could expose. And on that note, let's talk about something that rarely makes it into the royal puff pieces, the one thing that's always lingered beneath the surface of Kate's fairy tale marriage, that good old English class prejudice. Because no matter how many tiaras she's worn or how many elocution lessons she's taken, Kate will never fully be accepted by the aristocracy. And the epicenter of this drama, a clique of posh rural aristocrats known as the Turnip Toffs, a group of Kate and William's childhood friends. And who sits right atop of this pile? Rose Hanbury, the Marchioness of Cholmondeley? Back in 2019, the tabloids started whispering about a rift between Kate and Rose Hanbury, who is the wife of the Marquess of Cholmondeley, David Rock Savage. The two couples, William and Kate, Rose and David, were thick as thieves in the posh countryside circle of Norfolk elites known as the Turnip Toffs. According to reports, Kate allegedly decided to phase out Rose from the group. No one said why. The official press line was, mysterious reasons. But behind the scenes, the talk was all about an affair. William had gotten too close to Rose, and when Kate tried to exile her rival from their social circle, the Turnip Toffs, who considered Kate a jumped-up commoner to begin with, clapped back. Suddenly, Rose wasn't the one being frozen out. Kate was. Marrying a prince doesn't mean you've arrived. They tolerated Kate as long as she understood her role as the dutifully stoic wife who would have the good aristocratic sense to know to turn a blind eye to her husband's infidelities, like so many aristocratic women who came before her. But Kate still held on to those annoying middle-class notions of love and loyalty, and the moment she tried to wield power, they turned on her. Someone went to the press. Leaks about the alleged affair started emerging not long after Kate made her move. The story goes that Giles Corrin, a food critic, tweeted and then deleted that everyone knows about the affair, darling. Now, Giles is actually a very close friend to another royal adjacent bigwig, Andrew Parker Bowles, Camilla's son. William panicked, especially since these rumors included sordid details about his strange sexual proclivities. William scrambled to protect himself. Someone had to be sacrificed. Guess who it was? Despite overwhelming evidence pointing to Camilla, William did what he always does when facing a scandal. He deflected it to his brother. Because around this time, just as the turnip gossip hit fever pitch, the smear campaign against the Sussexes kicked into high gear. Harry and Meghan were suddenly flooded with negative stories. There were headlines like Duchess difficult, diva demands, and staff leaving in droves. As one commenter put it, William sold out Harry to save his own ass. And it wouldn't be the first time he did it, or the last. And if you're wondering why Kate looks so isolated these days, well, just look around. No more turnip invites, no real friends, just softly lit videos about nature. The Toffs shut her out, and William, true to form, didn't defend her. At one point, while at one of their Toff gatherings at Houghton Hall, William committed an offense most women would consider immediate grounds for divorce. He complained about Kate's cooking, stating that the reason he was so skinny was that he had to put up with his wife's cooking. Ouch! Now, I don't know about you folks, but if my husband embarrassed me like that, well, let me just leave it there. Now, according to insiders, the issue wasn't just the alleged affair. It was about rank. In the unspoken rules of the British class system, Rose outranked Kate, even though Kate is married to the future king. Kate was furious. She ordered William to phase Rose out, even begging him not to invite her to his father's coronation. But William, being William, didn't lift a finger. She was forced to face her rural rival, who it turns out was invited by Camilla. That's right. Camilla just could not resist twisting the proverbial knife into Kate's back. Kate was livid. She stared daggers at Camilla as she slithered her way down the aisles of Westminster Abbey, Elizabeth's crown atop her head, triumphant and gleeful at the injury she was all too happy to inflict on Kate. And how did Kate react? She refused to curtsy. Then she retreated to the safety of her mother's bosom, seeking counsel from Carol, planning their next move. And folks, I've always said that Kate simply does not possess the necessary ruthlessness required to navigate this treacherous social landscape. She needs Carol to go head to head with the likes of someone as vicious as Camilla. And she knows all too well that when it comes to extramarital affairs, Camilla loves to stir the pot. But who is this appointed queen of the Turnip Toffs anyway? Sarah Rose Hanbury is the granddaughter of Lady Elizabeth Lambert, a lady-in-waiting seen here attending the wedding of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. The Hanbury sisters were seen as qualified for aristocratic society. There was just one problem though. Like many aristocrats in Britain, they were poor. Rose found work as a fashion model, and she did a brief stint as a political staffer, but they could not escape the glaring reality of poverty. With their prospects dimming, they did what most poor young noblewomen in Britain do. The sisters went on a mission to snag a wealthy man. They were soon seen at fashionable gatherings attended by politicians and who's in society. Not long after, it was announced that Rose was engaged to David Rocksavage, a man 20 years her senior. And the next day, it was announced she was already pregnant. David Rocksavage checked all the boxes. A descendant of Britain's first Prime Minister, Robert Walpole, he holds the title of the 7th Marquess of Cholmondeley, and until 2022 was Lord Great Chamberlain, an obscure aristocratic job title that involves, a lot of antiquated ceremonial theatrics. Anyway, like his enigmatic wife, he's quite the man of mystery. He was a filmmaker for many years, and like most of his ilk, his wealth is mainly derived from his inherited property holdings, as well as other mysterious sources. Now, around the same time the rumors began to swirl about William and Rose, word on the street was that David was spending most of his time in Paris with his longtime male companion, Francois Barnier, who was once accused of scamming the L'Oreal heiress out of millions. The truth began to reveal itself. David and Rose's marriage was one of convenience. In other words, a typical aristocratic arrangement. He didn't seem that much interested in a conventional partnership, but he needed an heir. Rose gave him 3, and out of the bargain, she got the soft life, a woman of leisure whose main concern is wallpaper and place settings. But most importantly, money was no longer an object. And with David mostly out of the picture, she was free to host parties and carry on with as many dalliances as she desired, like a true aristocrat. And for all accounts, William was smitten. The Spanish press reported that they were seen together having a quiet dinner on Valentine's Day, the same year that Kate would later go missing. I don't know about you folks, I can't quite put my finger on it, but something about this bunch just screams swingers to me. Whatever they were up to, it was too much for Kate, and she wanted nothing more to do with Rose, and all her entreaties begging William to end it fell on deaf ears. After all, his father had a mistress. Why shouldn't he? This is what bugs her the most. She sees Harry being a loyal, loving husband and father and doing everything he can to protect his family. That should have been her. Instead, she's stuck in a gilded fishbowl surrounded by sharks. This puts into perspective disappearance saga at the end of 2023, the same year her parents' financial woes were plastered on the headlines all across Britain. Now the Toffs had something more to snicker about behind her back, and if you really get to understand Kate, you know that what Kate fears above all else is the shattering of her carefully constructed facade. And speaking of sharks, William recently admitted to Piers Morgan that he would rather die than reconcile with his brother. The press later reported that the first thing he plans to do as monarch is to strip the Sussexes of their titles. Methinks he doth protest too much. He just comes off as bitter and dangerously obsessed. The weekend after Meghan posted on her Instagram this video of her and Harry at a Beyonce concert packing on the PDA, the palace responded with this YouGov poll declaring William the winner of an imaginary popularity contest, and surprise, Meghan polling just barely above Prince Andrew. Okay. That same day, Mr. Popularity was seen arriving at a ceremony where he was greeted by rows and rows of barricades instead of actual people. And it's just obvious to me that this is maddening him to the point of paralysis. William barely does anything, and it seems like he's unable to realize anything worthwhile because all of his mental bandwidth is focused on getting revenge on his brother and flying around to football matches. Because despite all the palace spin, William cannot escape one brutal truth. Harry left and didn't come crawling back. He wasn't broken and he didn't go broke. Instead, he and Meghan built a life and a brand outside of the firm. And folks, it's always been about control. William's fragile ego simply cannot process that Harry succeeded without the system. It's the one thing William can't compete with. Because unlike Harry, William has never had to prove himself outside of the firm. And with the British royal family desperate to control every headline and every narrative, combined with their penchant for secrecy, they will always find themselves the subject of conspiracy, which brings me to my final story. It involves the name that no one in the palace wants to hear spoken aloud, Thomas Kingston. And folks, I'm not letting go of this. Last February, the sudden death of financier Thomas Kingston sent shockwaves across the globe. And not just because he was married to Lady Gabriella Windsor, a cousin to the king. He was, by many accounts, sharp, trusted, discreet, and deeply connected to the financial arteries of the monarchy itself. For 5 years, he worked for Schroders, the investment firm that handles a substantial portion of the Crown Estate's assets. Colleagues described him as meticulous, razor sharp, and deeply principled. Not the kind of man you'd expect to suddenly be found dead with a gunshot wound to the head and then within hours have it ruled a suicide. Something doesn't add up. Just weeks earlier, Thomas Kingston had been seen at public events looking completely composed. Friends reported no signs of distress, no hint of mental health crisis. He had a stable career, a seemingly loving marriage, and by all accounts, a calm, rational disposition. Why the constantly shifting narratives? Just a year after his death, the firm he co-founded, Devonport Capital, went into administration. This firm helped fund government-backed development deals in post-conflict zones. Devonport would have had access to sensitive financial and political networks, many of them overlapping with royal influence and international contracts. And now, Gabriella is safely ensconced in the confines of Kensington Palace, all at the king's request, under royal protection, despite holding no working royal title. What does she know? Thomas Kingston wasn't just a financier, he was a gatekeeper, a man who by virtue of his position could have been privy to things the firm desperately wants to keep quiet, from money trails to questionable investments, off-the-books security arrangements, to private communications that the public was never meant to see. And now, he's gone, just like that.